مشاهدينا في كل مكان، أهلا بحضراتكم. من فترة قليلة اتقلبت السوشيال ميديا والأوساط الثقافية والتاريخية وحتى الحضارية في مصر بعد عرض برومو مسلسل نتفليكس كوين كليوباترا. وتعرض المسلسل اللي بدأ عرضه قبل أيام لانتقادات شديدة تم توجيهها لصناع الفيلم والقائمين عليه بعد ظهور الملكة كليوباترا في صورة سيدة من ذوات البشرة السمراء، وهو على عكس التاريخ تماما في دعوة جديدة لحركة ليست بالجديدة تدعى أفروسنتريك، في محاولة لسرقة التاريخ وتزييفه لصالح ناس لم يقوموا بأي دور في حضارة قديمة وأصولها وتاريخها موثق لآلاف السنين. زميلنا رامي نوار قام بدور كبير جدا عشان نقدر نعمل سلسلة كبيرة من اللقاءات مع علماء المصريات والتاريخ القديم من مختلف الجامعات العالمية العريقة عشان نكشف فيها من خلال علماء متخصصين محاولات تزييف التاريخ اللي قامت بيها منصة نتفليكس وكمان صناع مسلسل كوين كليوباترا. النهارده في لقاء حصري وجديد ضمن سلسلة لقاءاتنا هيكون معانا دكتور كولين دارنيل، عالمة المصريات في جامعة ييل ومؤلفة كتاب Egypt's Golden Couple. Dr. Colleen, welcome in اليوم 7 TV. We're happy to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Doctor, at first we want you to introduce yourself to Egyptian and Arabic audience as they want to know more about you.
So I am Egyptian, and I spend much of my time studying ancient hieroglyphics. So I have translated, for example, most hieroglyphic texts in the New Kingdom tombs in the Valley of the Kings, as well as published a number of papyri with fascinating texts, such as ancient Egyptian works of historical fiction.
Okay. So, Doctor, you participated in the documentary Queen Cleopatra. The question here, did you know that the figure they chose in the casting would be black skin?
When I was interviewed for the show, it was only with the knowledge that it was going to be about Queen Cleopatra. I had no knowledge at any point until the trailer was released how any of the reenactments would be filmed or who would portray the historical figures.
Okay, and they didn't even tell you any details about that?
No, they did not.
And how did they contact you? They didn't tell you before the movie all these details?
The details that I was given during the course of my interview were questions about the life of Cleopatra, when she was born, how she inherited the kingdom of Egypt from her father, Ptolemy XII, her participation in the Battle of Actium, for example, with Mark Antony. So my interview was related only to the known historical facts of Queen Cleopatra and nothing about the sensationalist portrayal of her family origins, which I only learned when I saw the trailer.
Yes, exactly when you saw the trailer. Have you tried to reach them again?
I did. And unfortunately, once my interview is completed, there was nothing else that I could do with regards to the show.
Yes. And do you agree that this is an attempt to falsify history by the West, or what do you think, Doctor?
I really believe that placing modern racial categories, as was emphasized in the trailer, onto the ancient past is not historically accurate. And there was speculation in the show, and there is speculation among historians, that Cleopatra's mother may have been Egyptian. And there was an opportunity missed to cast Cleopatra as with an Egyptian actress, that there was a perfect opportunity to highlight the potential origins of Cleopatra's family if her mother were Egyptian and have her portrayed by an Egyptian actress. And I think what's most significant to emphasize is that the descendants of the ancient Egyptians are people living in modern Egypt.
Okay, Doctor, why do you think they insist and still insisting on showing Queen Cleopatra in the form of a black-skinned lady?
We know historically that Cleopatra goes back, her family derives from only the first who was the general of Alexander the Great. And we know essentially every single member of Cleopatra's family, with the exception of her mother. And so that opportunity to highlight Cleopatra's potential Egyptian heritage, as has been mentioned by historians, that was an opportunity that was missed by not portraying her with an Egyptian actress.
And Doctor, the term Afrocentric began to spread so much. So what are the reasons for the emergence of this movement?
It's not a special in Afrocentrism, but what I have studied is the influence that ancient Egypt had on civilizations around the world. And this is from antiquity all the way to the present. Ancient Egypt was so awe-inspiring that we see it inspiring the ancient Greeks, Renaissance Europe, and people around the world much more recently. But I think where the problem lies is that only the modern Egyptians can claim to be direct descendants of the ancient Egyptians. And if we look over thousands of years with interactions the ancient Egyptians and the modern populations had with people to the north, south, east, and west, what I'd like to see is the information provided by the Fayum portrait. These are paintings within a couple of hundred years of Cleopatra's death, and they really show how we can imagine Cleopatra to have looked because of records of the time.
Yes. And Dr. You, as an Egyptologist and a history writer, how do you confront the Afrocentric and how could you spread the facts around the world?
I think the best way to combat misunderstandings about ancient Egypt, another great example is the horrible lie that aliens built the pyramid. The way we combat this misinformation is to emphasize how much we do know about ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians left behind thousands of statues and paintings and hieroglyphic texts, and they tell us about themselves as Egyptians and how they perceived their world. And even though most tomb paintings are idealized, I think, again, we can combat misunderstandings about ancient Egyptians by looking at paintings like those Fayum portraits, where we really can stare into the face of an ancient Egyptian who inhabited the Fayum. And I would encourage people to visit Egypt and see its amazing ancient, medieval, and modern monuments and meet people descended from the ancient Egyptians.
Yes, Doctor. You know, after broadcasting the Queen Cleopatra series on Netflix, there were many reactions here on the Egyptian street talking about why everything was wrong at the series as data and also accessories or clothes. What's your opinion about that?
I think there is so much information about clothing and accessories. That's a topic I've studied extensively, is clothing in ancient Egypt. And in fact, I gave a lecture recently where with a single rectangular piece of cloth, you could make a perfect ancient Egyptian dress. So I think, again, there were many opportunities missed to show the reality of life in the court of Queen Cleopatra.
And Doctor, many people, especially the Afrocentric, talks about the Coast era and that Queen Cleopatra belongs to this era. So what is the truth?
So Queen Cleopatra, we know for absolute certain, her father is Ptolemy the 12th. Most likely, her mother is Cleopatra the 5th. Because her mother is not named, there is the possibility that her mother was Egyptian. And that is as much as we can say from the ancient evidence. But I will just say again, because I think a lot of people outside of Egypt do not know the Fayum portrait, and that it's such a great way to look into the face of an ancient Egyptian.
Okay, and in your opinion, Doctor, was there a series or a movie that designed the true character of Queen Cleopatra or the Egyptian history at all in a real way?
There have been so many stories told about Cleopatra much of it intentionally to paint her in a negative light, thinking of the Roman historians and the idea of Cleopatra being a temptress. And this propaganda against Cleopatra that goes all the way back to antiquity continued in many of the modern portrayals of her reign, of her life. But because Cleopatra is such a famous figure from history, I think in movies and plays, there is this notion that she reflects whatever society is telling her story at a particular time. And when it is fiction, when it is a play, when it is a movie, I think that's very different than an attempt to show something as being historically true.
And there were many rumors about the death of Queen Cleopatra specifically. What is the truth about her death?
So we don't know for certain how Cleopatra died. We can say that she committed suicide because there are enough ancient records to suggest that is indeed the case. And this fits well with the amount of control that she exerted over every aspect of her life, to the extent that she could, with Egypt being very much under threat by the Romans. And so rather than surrender to Octavian, rather than be dragged through the streets of Rome in chains, she killed herself. And at least one story that survives is that she was bitten by an asp or a cobra. And this is a really interesting indication of Cleopatra seeing herself not just as a Greek Hellenistic queen, but also an Egyptian queen, because the cobra is the symbol of one of the symbols of kingship in ancient Egypt.
And Doctor, the makers of the documentary, they know that Cleopatra is a very, very famous, iconic woman. So haven't they thought that people will go back and know the real information?
Unfortunately, I have not had any conversations that would allow me to speculate about anyone's motives beyond what has been said in the media.
And I'm now asking you, Doctor, was Queen Cleopatra very beautiful, as history says?
So that also is impossible to answer. What has survived are portraits on coins and statues where she wanted to show herself as Hellenistic, as a Greek ruler, and carvings on Egyptian temple walls where she wants to portray herself in the guise of an Egyptian queen going back thousands of years into pharaonic history. But none of this tells us how she actually looked. And to me, what is actually more interesting and significant about Cleopatra isn't her physical appearance or beauty, but how intelligent she was, how savvy she was as a queen, enabling to keep her kingdom intact, and using the fact that she was a woman, that she could form diplomatic alliances through romantic relationships and bearing Julius Caesar and Mark Antony children, and that's that other kings trying to negotiate with the Romans had. So I like to think about Cleopatra in terms of her accomplishments more so than her appearance.
Yes. And Doctor, my last question for you. You're in Egypt now, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
I hope you're having a good time, but tell us what you're doing exactly in Egypt.
So I am currently participating in an American archaeological expedition done in conjunction with the Ministry of Antiquities at a site just north of ancient Edfu. So in that area, exploring desert roads, it's an absolute pleasure to collaborate with Egyptian colleagues here in the area, and the expedition house where I'm staying and where this is being built has no air conditioning and was built quite a long time ago. So thank you for asking to be able to explain.
Yes, yes. And people want
background.
to know what exactly the place you are in now.
Oh, so it's between Edfu and the ancient city of El Kab. So in a village very close to denial.
Okay. And you're having a good time, you're enjoying your staying. Are you interacting with Egyptian people?
All the time. So it's just absolutely amazing to be part of an expedition in Egypt and to even play a small role in helping to learn more about ancient Egypt's past and then share that with people around.
Have you talked about the documentary Queen Cleopatra with any of Egyptian people during your staying?
I have. I definitely have. And I completely understand the amount of anger and upset. And I just want to say yet again that I think it is incredibly important for people who study ancient Egypt to emphasize the fact that the modern Egyptians are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians.
Yes, of course, for sure. Dr. Colleen, I have enjoyed this interview very, very much. And I would like to thank you very much. And thanks for being here with us in Yom 7 TV.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. ده كان لقاء آخر ضمن سلسلة لقاءاتنا مع علماء آثار وتاريخ من مختلف أنحاء العالم لمحاولة الدفاع عن تاريخنا وحضارتنا ومحاولة تعريف الكل إن محاولة سرقة وتزييف التاريخ هتواجهه بكل قوة من كل مصري حريص على تاريخه وحضارته من السرقة والتزييف. نشكركم شكرا جزيلا على المتابعة وانتظرونا دوما في المزيد وإلى اللقاء.